language class is speaking. It's really having to use language you may have learned, but you haven't acquired. And that's very, very stressful. We all know that. In fact, I have several papers where people have said this. One person, Price, it's the greatest source of anxiety. Lauren Sacco says, every student in his beginning French class said, speaking was the highest provoking anxiety-causing activity. There's some informal studies I think are really compelling. An anthropologist named Sorensen did some studies in the Valpes River in Colombia and Brazil. In a small area, there were 10,000 people in a small area. That's not very many people. If you go to a football game and there are only 10,000 people watching the game, it's not very much. You can get 50,000, no trouble, okay? In this area, 10,000 people, there were 24 different languages spoken. And the rule of the society was, you can't marry someone who speaks your language. Wow. They think outsiders are disgusting, okay? Anyway, what happened there, the children, when they're growing up, they had to learn mommy's language. They had to learn daddy's language, okay? And the language of the little group they were a part of, their peer group, their friends, the next language up, their whole lives, they were trying to acquire other languages of these 10,000 languages in this small group, okay? So Sorensen, brilliant, asked them how they did it. First of all, no correction ever. It was a rule of the society that you cannot correct anybody about anything. Very convenient for us. How did they do it? They didn't say anything for a long time. They waited until they were ready. They had a long, silent period where they just listened. They only started to use things that they felt comfortable with. It could be months, it could be a year, it could be longer until they started to speak. And this was natural, and they became excellent polyglots. They all spoke several languages, every single one of them. A study done by Eugene Nida, one of the heroes in language when I was a student of all this, it's wonderful. He talked about workers in an area in West Africa who would leave their home and work in the neighboring village for months at a time, alongside of the locals. How did they get the language? They waited, exactly the same. They waited until they could hear it. To hear in their group means to understand it. And that generally took a year or so. Now, if you look today at people acquiring languages naturally, it doesn't take a year, it's much quicker because we now have language classes. In language classes, you can get comprehensible input right away. And it's made for you, it's made comprehensible. So we're doing a lot better these days, but it's still the same idea. Okay, so number one, we acquire by listening, we acquire by reading, and it happens gradually. That's number two. It doesn't happen all at once. My colleagues at the University of Illinois, really first-class research group, they have determined with English as a first language that each time you read or hear a new word in context and you understand a little of it, you get a tiny amount. Over time, it builds up gradually. It takes 15, 20 repetitions until you're finally getting the feel for it. In language class, we think you're going to get it right away. New word on Monday, you take a quiz on Wednesday, you're supposed to have it. No, it's slower, but over time, it works. Now, how do we do it? We do it by comprehension through context, by understanding what people tell us, understanding what we're reading. Now, context has been attacked. Let me defend context.